Let's go back in time. Picture Paris in the 1920s. You know the scene. Glowing street lamps on the Seine, jazz spilling out of clubs, champagne flowing. This is the city of the lost generation, Hemingway, Fitzgerald, a place that felt like the center of the universe. But underneath all that glitter, an invisible shadow was creeping in. We're about to pull back the curtain on a forgotten piece of history and see how the City of Light became, for a while, the world's very first heroin capital.
So here's a wild thought for you. What if, 100 years ago, you could just stroll into a fancy pharmacy on the Champs-Élysées and buy pure medical-grade heroin right off the shelf? I mean, no sketchy back-alley deals, no secrets. In a lot of cases, it was just doctor's orders. It sounds absolutely nuts, but for a time, this was reality.
And the story of how this all happened, well, it doesn't start in some dark, shady corner of the city. Nope. It begins in a clean, sterile, state-of-the-art laboratory. It begins with the promise of a miracle. What's so crucial to get is just how legitimate this all was. Back in 1897, a chemist at Bayer, the same company that makes our aspirin, was trying to find a safer, better version of morphine. The result was a brand new drug they called heroin, from the German word for heroic. And by 1925, it was being sold everywhere as a safe, non-addictive cure-all.
And this wasn't some fringe idea, The entire medical establishment was completely on board. You had respected medical journals calling heroin the pinnacle of pharmaceutical achievement. It was seen as the cutting edge of science, modern, effective, and totally trustworthy. And because they thought it was a miracle, doctors prescribed it for pretty much everything. Got a bad cough? Heroin. Can't sleep? Heroin. They even prescribed it for this really vague thing they called American nervousness. The confidence they had in this stuff was it was breathtaking.
So this medical wonder drug crashes right into the cultural explosion of 1920s Paris and lands squarely in the hands of all those American artists and writers who were flocking to the city. And the result of that collision? It was staggering. Records from that time suggest that within just 6 months of getting to Paris, 1 out of every 4 American expats had tried heroin. And for most of them, it didn't start at a party. It started with a prescription from a doctor they trusted. And to make that number feel real, get this, receipts found in Ernest Hemingway's old papers show he was buying 60 bottles of respiratory medication a month. Every single month. That's 2 bottles a day of a heroin-based medicine. It's a stunning detail that just shows you the sheer scale of what was happening. Now, here's a key part of the story. These brilliant, creative people weren't just passive victims. They were active participants. They actually convinced themselves that their growing habit was a tool, something that could unlock their creativity and open new doors of consciousness. But pretty soon, those lively debates in the cafes just faded away. Writers would just stare at blank pages for hours, completely lost in the haze. With so many people using, a whole new economy started bubbling up in the shadows, and its epicenter was right in the artistic heart of Paris. This part is just so wild. You had artists who couldn't sell their paintings, and they suddenly realized that selling heroin was way more profitable. So they adopted these incredibly poetic nicknames for themselves, like the chemist of colors, kind of blending their new, illicit trade with the romantic, artistic identity of the neighborhood. And the supply chain itself? Oh, it was a masterpiece of logistics. It was a global operation, starting with opium from fields in China, then processed in Swiss labs, and then legally shipped to France disguised as textile supplies. And the craziest part? The French Postal Service was the final delivery partner, dropping packages right at the city's fanciest addresses. Delivered by the mailman. Unbelievable. And listen, this wasn't just a thing for the bohemian artists. This habit climbed all the way up the social ladder to the highest levels of Parisian society, and it got normalized in the most surreal ways. Just try to picture this scene, okay? You have the wives of diplomats and wealthy socialites hosting what they called medical tea parties. So in these beautiful rooms filled with flowers, they'd be sipping tea laced with cocaine and using these elegant little silver syringes to administer heroin. All the while, their personal doctors were telling them that this modern German medicine was perfectly safe. The disconnect is it's astounding. But of course, every dream, especially a dream this intense, has to end. And for Paris, the party came to a sudden, brutal stop. The waking point was harsh. The whole thing collapsed in 2 devastating waves.
First, in 1927, the French government finally woke up to the crisis and made heroin illegal. Just like that, overnight. With no rehab or treatment programs, thousands of people were thrown into agonizing withdrawal. Then, just 2 years later, the 1929 stock market crash hit, wiping out the fortunes of the expats. A medical crisis became an economic catastrophe.
The consequences were just catastrophic. Suicide rates shot through the roof. The money vanished. And that glittering creative culture of the lost generation, it just dissolved into a haze of desperation and danger. The dream was well and truly over. So what's the lesson here? What do we take away from this forgotten haze? It's a really powerful cautionary tale about what we call progress, how we see the world and our own human vulnerabilities. Ultimately, the story of 1920s Paris is just this stark reminder that our idea of progress can be incredibly fragile. What's celebrated as a scientific breakthrough in one decade can easily become a societal disaster in the next. It just goes to show you that the line between a medicine and a poison, between a helpful tool and a destructive vice, sometimes it's terrifyingly thin. And that leaves all of us with one final, lingering question for our own time. What miracle we're celebrating today might just be the haze of tomorrow.